When do we know that our child needs support?
So it's kind of trying to see the whole picture, and it then enables you to tackle the challenges which are lying behind the behaviours rather than just the behaviours.
What's happening with the girls today? They don't like their face, they don't like their eyes, they look sideways, they withdraw.
I think it's complex, but some of those reasons are going to be linked to the biology of being female.
So if my kid is unhappy, then I must be not a good parent, right? It's about my ability to hold on in the moment, even if the feelings of my kids don't look well and they feel really bad for me.
Our digestive system is linked to our stress response. We don't digest food well when we're stressed. In fact, our mental health and physical health are so intrinsically linked. Essentially, we all, and children particularly, desperately want to be loved and have a sense of belonging and feel valued and feel like they are worthy of the care and affection they get from others. And I think that drives a lot of that kind of need to constantly look out for cues that you might not be fitting in or you might not be loved.
Părinți CuMinți cu Simona Gherghe și Oana Moraru. Un podcast Zunivers.
Bun găsit! Sunteți la Părinți CuMinți, locul în care învățăm să fim părinți mai buni pentru copiii noștri. Sunt Simona Gherghe, ca de obicei, alături de mine Oana Moraru, specialistă în parenting și educație, fondator de școală, autor de cărți, iar invitata noastră de astăzi este Dr. Beth Mosley, consultant și psiholog clinician, autoarea cărții Familii fericite, care tocmai a apărut acum câteva zile la editura Zix Books. Aceasta este cartea invitatei noastre de astăzi. Welcome, Dr. Mosley. It's such a pleasure to have you here at our podcast right on the European Mental Week, these days. Yeah. And I think it's a very good opportunity to talk about this subject because we usually have to have the tendency to take care of our physical health, but we ignore our mental health, and sometimes it's more important.
Absolutely. In fact, our mental health and physical health are so intrinsically linked. Essentially, our brains are in our bodies, and I think sometimes we forget how we are biological and our stress response is driven by the biology of our body. So yes, it's really important and becoming even more important as we're seeing so many young people struggling with anxiety, low mood, difficulties managing their feelings, and that's really affecting their ability to engage with life and develop and have a childhood where they're free from some of the challenges that we experience and stresses that we experience as adults. So I think it's a worrying time for adults in children's lives, whether you're a parent or a teacher, you're trying to work out what can I do to not unintentionally contribute to the problem, because I think for some parents you're worrying, will I make things worse? How do I help?
And I also think this is the first generation that is actually concerned with their feelings. Maybe we have this anxiety and we have all these problems because we finally have a vocabulary for our feelings, and parents are interested. They don't know how to do it, but they are finally interested in how their kids feel, and they're finally interested in helping them with their feelings. My generation had no vocabulary about feelings. I didn't discuss feelings with my mom, right? I think this is the first generation that actually feels the feelings of their grandparents, of their parents, and we need tools, and hopefully you will offer some tools in our discussion today.
Yes.
Because I don't think it's all that dark. It's because they have anxiety, they are worried, but this is the first generation that is actually willing to feel something and discuss about their feelings, and parents don't know how.
That's such a good point. And I meet with lots of adolescents. I have lots of discussions with groups of adolescents. And one of the things they told me recently was, we feel better equipped than our parents to understand mental health. We know our own mental health. We follow people on social media who talk about mental health. Our parents and the adults around us actually don't. They're the ones who need to upskill themselves. So I think young people are seeing themselves as more experienced and ahead of their parents.
But you know why? In Romania, even maybe nowadays, if you are saying that you are seeing a psychologist, you're kind of stigmatized, you know.
Yes, I think it's a shift. There's a shift in the UK because so many young people are needing support and getting help. And our school system tends to provide counsellors at school and mental health professionals who come into schools and provide support for young people who are struggling with their behaviour or their learning or their emotional well-being. So I think the stigma in the UK is reducing. But I guess the challenge with that is some young people may perceive that a normal range of emotion, fairly normal anxieties, need some professional support. And quite often what you were mentioning about parents' fear sometimes of how do I manage these difficult feelings? How do I respond to them? Because this is something I wasn't kind of brought up with being given those skills, means that parents too almost panic when they see their children struggling and want the help from a professional to support their child. And I guess that's what I've been so passionate about in my work in the UK is how do I, as the expert who meets with hundreds of families who've waited a long time to see me, help them get access to this information so they become less afraid of emotions or seeing their child in distress and thinking, I need to move my child away from this place of distress, because nobody wants to see their child suffering or struggling. But once you start to see that the distress itself reveals something very important about what's going on in your child's life, what matters to them, what their values are as a young person, you as a parent can move from a position of reacting with fear and I must shut this down or move this on or distract my child from this problem to thinking, actually, let's be curious about this. Let's give space for this. And from that place, your child learns, I don't need to be afraid of these feelings.
Yeah.
Actually, they are a very real part of being a human being, and they often reveal very important things about who I am growing into be as a person. So a really good example is young people, particularly teenagers, get very distressed about friendship breakups. Or some of the challenges they have with managing technology. I mean, it's very intense, the way they interact on Snapchat and all of their posts and their response perhaps to feedback from their peer group that people don't like what they've posted. That constant pressure can create a huge amount of distress in young people. And that's very natural because as a teenager, you want to have a sense of belonging. You want to feel accepted. And you value, for many young people, friendship, which means loyalty and commitment to one another. So when the things happen in your life that go against that, of course that's going to feel painful. Of course that's going to make you feel angry and sad. That's telling you you've got some great values as a teenager. You care about people, you care about belonging, you care about loyalty and friendship. And once you can have those conversations with your child rather than sort of saying, well, it's not worth getting worked up about these things, or why don't you just come off your phone and then you won't have these terrible experiences. You're kind of validating your child's feelings and helping them tune into why it hurts and then what they can do about it. So most young people in those scenarios will withdraw. They might react in an aggressive way back. You've said something mean about me, I'm going to say something mean about you. The problem with that is if what's most important to you is a sense of belonging and loyalty, then you're going against your values. You're going to feel worse. So once you understand what's important to me is belonging, being part of something, loyalty, friendship, you can then make choices about your behaviour and you can say, what do I need to do, as hard as this is, to reconnect, to have a sense of belonging again? Do I need to reach out to another friend who can kind of soothe some of that distress I'm feeling? Do I need to have that conversation with my mom because she'll get it? Rather than withdrawing and isolating yourself and perpetuating that cycle, you can move towards what's important to you rather than away. So your job as parent is to kind of coach your child almost into understanding who are you, and actually the thing that you see as a bad negative thing is actually, if you reframe it, a beautiful thing about you as a person. And I think once you can start to have those conversations with your teens and tweens, and even your younger children,
yes,
they get a different perspective on what it means to feel. They get the language around that. And you as a parent become a person they can trust to come to not escalate distress or push it away.
But as a parent, I noticed that my reflex when my daughter has a problem is to treat this problem like a project at my job place, right? So how do we treat a problem? We give advice, we tell her we shouldn't feel this way, we ask her or him, why do you think that? Why did you do that? Like, we expect answers right away. And I really loved what you said in your interview, in one of your interviews in the book, that when you speak to your kids about issues that concern them, they watch your face very closely and they get a lot of insight from the movement of your face rather than from the words you're speaking. And when they see fear, when they see like judgment, or anyway, they kind of see every movement of your face like there's something really wrong about their situation, and my mom just wants to fix me. She just wants to, I don't know, enhance my well-being without really listening to me. So really listening to my daughter, who is 21 now, is still a skill I'm learning. After all these 30 years with listening to kids, she's still teaching me how to listen to her. And it's mostly all about my face, that I should keep my face without any twitch or something. How do you do that? This is a tool. How do you listen without letting the child see the solver, the fixer in yourself? Because they hate that. They hate it when you
don't
say
we hate that?
Yeah,
when you go to a friend and you kind of have a problem, you do not want them to fix the problem straight away. You want them just to listen to you and get it and be in your shoes.
Let's just tell the parents how to listen.
So yes, absolutely. And I think it's important to understand some of this is about the brain science. So teenagers are programmed to be particularly sensitive to social cues, negative social cues, because it's so important for them to get it right socially in order to survive and thrive.
They get it all in a very dramatic key, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we know that if you show a teenager a neutral face, they will see that it's angry. So even if your face is the worried face, this is what I say to teenagers and parents all the time, and actually the young people I do therapy with, I say your worried face to your child is your angry face. So even as a therapist, I know that my worried face, I kind of have a frown. My sad face is my worried face, is concerned face is kind of like this.
Like, you shouldn't be this at this moment,
but
right?
What I'm trying to convey is I deeply care about this. I'm listening. So when I'm in a session with teenagers, I tell them, I say, by the way, this is my worried face. It's not my angry face. I'm really explicit about it because I know I've got quite an expressive face. And I also know it's almost impossible to hide what I'm feeling sometimes. So I take away some of the fear for the young person or the kind of potential for misinterpretation. So I think you can do that as a parent because you're right. You've got the kind of cognitive load in your brain of processing this information. And it's so natural that you, just like you described, you just want to jump in before they've even finished talking and solve the problem. And like you say, that's really invalidating and it's not what that young person's really hoping for from you. And that sensitivity to criticism and judgment. So obviously I've spoken to hundreds of young people and all of them come to me with a great deal of shame as they describe their internal world, their thoughts, and the things that they've been thinking and holding on to for many months, maybe years even, on their own in their rooms. And when they tell me those thoughts, they are so worried about what I'm going to say next. the judgment, the criticism. And often for young people, I'm saying, wow, you know, you're an incredible young person. You have been managing so much in your life on your own. And what you're telling me shows me how much and how deeply you care. And they say, there's not something wrong with me. I'm not ill.
I think this is the number one problem with most of them. Maybe most of us. Like, is there something inherently wrong with us? Am I damaged like from the beginning? That's what they all worry about. Why? Why do you think is that?
I think as human beings, you know, we're not programmed to be happy. We're programmed to look out for danger. So I think our brains are hardwired to notice the tough stuff because essentially from a kind of an evolutionary point of view, that's what's going to keep us safe. So I think in this day and age, particularly, we are exposed to so much information constantly, which, you know, highlights quite often how we might be inadequate compared to other people because of social media. You know, everybody's looking beautiful, everyone's putting their best moments of their life online. So it kind of enhances that thought, I'm not as good as everybody else. Essentially, we all, and children particularly, desperately want to be loved and have a sense of belonging and feel valued and feel like they are worthy of the care and affection they get from others. And I think that drives a lot of that kind of need to constantly look out for cues that you might not be fitting in or you might not be loved. So it's a very natural place for our brains to go, and it requires a lot of intentional work to help our brains to not do that. So if we expect ourselves to be naturally positive in our disposition, and some people are more naturally predisposed towards feeling less anxious and being more positive. But generally, if we just relied on instinct and we just went with it all the time, we would potentially be looking out for threats all of the time. So we have to very intentionally focus on building a more positive view of the world, noticing the good stuff, instead of thinking, what did I get wrong? Thinking about, how did I get that right? And perhaps also looking at opportunities for not doing so well as a space to say, hey, I can learn something new here. It's okay to get it wrong. And if you think about the environments our children are in with school, it's all about getting it right. It's not necessarily about the process of getting it right means you need to get it wrong on the way. So there's something about us as parents, sometimes we struggle with our children getting it wrong. And sometimes we think, my child isn't developing as much in this area. Does that mean there's something wrong with them? Does that mean that's going to put them at risk of not doing so well in life? So all of this is rushing through our minds when we see our children struggling with something. And of course, our children pick up on this. So there's something about how do we, I mean, I don't know how you guys cope with not doing so well or having a sense of failure or not getting it right. It's tough, isn't it?
My kids, 5 years old already, they just announce their parents, I'm stupid, I'm not going to be able to do this. And their parents just jump in right away. No, you're smart, you can do it. Like, even when the kid lets you know I'm stupid, he does not think he or she is stupid. They just want to test the parent. Is my mom scared of the idea of me not being able to do stuff in school or kindergarten? And parents say, oh, my kid has low self-esteem. I'm gonna, do something more for he or she feeling worthy. But this doing more actually accentuates or makes the anxiety stronger, because the kid believes, oh, my mom wants to move me away from the idea that I'm stupid, I'm not being able at this point. Don't move them away, right? Just let them feel their feelings that are not able to do some stuff at some point in their life, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's so important to be able to accept that struggle is part of it. You can't get it right all the time, and that brings a lot of uncertainty
because you don't know.
But okay, let's think about the experience and the journey, not the goal. And I think that's a challenge. We're so focused a lot of the time on where we're trying to get our kids to. And I don't think we're necessarily thinking about where we get them to being independent adults who are able to look after themselves and do what they need to do to make a contribution to society and have relations. We're kind of just thinking about the next stage, getting them through primary school or middle school, getting their exams over with, making sure they've got friends, that kind of thing. And actually what we're trying to hopefully, we could be trying to do more of is thinking about just the journey, the experience in the moment, and if we can do more of helping our children be in the moment. And I think children are generally very good at that. I think we in our kind of structure of our life take that away from them. We kind of overstructure their lives in lots of ways. And I think, again, that's where technology isn't helpful, because we're filling the gaps of time with not the opportunity to be bored and just explore things, but instead to be online and kind of being exposed to lots of content, which reinforces some of the ideas that I'm not good enough. So I think it's some of it's about our comfort as parents, and so some of it's about the work we need to do with ourselves to kind of embrace our own imperfections as mothers and work colleagues and friends.
Yes, but sometimes it's very difficult, and we are triggered by our children. And you read something about the fury in the book. You said that no other person
so true
gets you furious as your 3 children.
That's right.
And I felt so good because the other day, I had a struggle with my almost 7 years old daughter. I have 2 small kids. So we yelled to each other. She said, and I said, she said, and I said, and she left for school very sad. I felt miserable all day. And I had all that feeling of guilty, which is absolutely terrible. How can we manage this?
It's so hard because I think that often our children bring out the worst in us. You know, I never get angry or kind of say things I don't mean to anyone else in my life because except my children. I mean, they see the best of me and they see the worst of me. But likewise, I see the best of them and the worst of them too. And there's something about acknowledging, you know, when you deeply care about people and things, that's when you're going to have those heightened emotions. And I think a big thing for me as a parent, obviously I'm not just a parent, I'm a psychologist, so the pressure is constantly on me in a sense. So I think when I'm very human and I experience those emotions, I've had to learn to be kind of kind to myself and acknowledge that quite often my fury is about the way that I'm losing control of myself in those moments, and often it's around times when I've got no control over my children, or then just not doing what I need them to do, which is added to the load of the other stresses in my life. Because I think that's a really important thing to remember. We're not coming at this as a blank canvas. We've all got our own backstory. We've all got our own experience of being parented in childhood. We've all got our dreams and aspirations for our children. Perhaps we want to give them things we didn't have in our childhood. A lot of pressure. But we've also got the stresses and pressures of daily life to deal with. We might have had to get up really early to prepare something for work before this moment that our child refused to put their shoes on and get out, get to school, whatever it might be. So we might be struggling with a relationship in our life. We might be worrying about money. We might be worrying about just can we give enough food to our children this week. There are some really major things that are going on for us as we're trying to do this job. So I think there's something about self-compassion, because we know that parents who think badly of themselves are more likely to struggle with the whole parenting experience, and that ends up having a negative impact for their children. So there's something about, I talk a lot about it in the book, is, you know your triggers, but also know what works for you, what helps you as a parent, what recharges your batteries, and don't as hard as it is, don't put that to the bottom of the pile, because your battery level and your energy is what's going to enable you to have moments of connection with your children. And I think the other thing is, I know as a psychologist that you don't have to get it right every time. In fact, that would be not good, because your children would have an unrealistic view of the world. At the end of the day, they're going to go into a world where most people don't get it right most of the time. And they're going to have to learn to manage that. So it's getting it right some of the time is the key. And that takes a lot of pressure off. And also the power of repair. So there are so many things I have said, which I really regret afterwards, particularly to my daughter, who has this ability to get me particularly worked up. And I don't know if that's because we're both women. I don't know if it's because she's got a personality that clashes or is more too like mine. She's very fiery. She's very courageous. There are so many attributes I love about her, but they also drive me crazy at the same time. So her confidence and her boisterous approach to life is a wonderful thing, but it's also such a challenging thing when you're that person's parent. So I think I also really have to embrace saying sorry. And, this is something young people I talk about all the time. They love it when their parents say sorry. True sorry, not sorry, but you shouldn't have, or sorry, I did that, but it was because I'm sorry I got it wrong. You know what? I was tired. I was exhausted. It's not a good enough excuse, but I did get it wrong. I shouldn't have lost the plot with you this morning. And, children take that. They love that. And then from there, you can think about how do we do this differently next time?
Yeah, sure.
For you, what was going on, for them, what was going on. And eventually your children learn the times of the day that are best for you. So now my kids know when they want to talk to me or get something from me, that they come to me at the best time of day for me, which tends to be early evening. And you learn about each other, and that's a great skill for life. You need to know when you want to ask your boss for a raise, when's the good time to have this conversation with my boss? So you're teaching them the skills, and you're also giving them permission to feel okay about making mistakes. Okay, so I got it wrong. That's a shameful experience. You might want to hide from that. You might want to deny it. But no, my mum showed me, or my dad showed me, that when they get it wrong, they own it. They say sorry, and we can use this as an opportunity to repair and develop the relationship. Some of the closest moments with my children have been after we've got things wrong, and we've been able to have true, deep conversations and make a plan about how to try to not get in that scenario again. Because for most families, the challenges they face are predictable problems. They tend to happen in the same scenarios. So if you can approach those problems at a time when you're both calm and in a reflective space, you can often come up with ideas to solve them. And, your kids are creative. They're amazing problem solvers. Get pen and paper out. Don't be afraid to say, gosh, we've got this problem in our family. Every day after school, the whole house is chaos. We always end up having these arguments. You're fighting with your brother. These things keep happening every day. Let's have a think about what could be going on and how we could make after school more difficult.
About my life?
Exactly. And then you might find out, most children actually really struggle with the transition from coming from school to home. I try to struggle with the transition from coming from work to home. Yeah. So it's about finding ways to help you relax and recover and move from being in a high drive, high stress situation where your adrenaline is on. And I talk a lot in the book about the stress response and how quite often for us during the day, our stress response is fully on. And when we come home, we need to transition into that relaxation response to give us time to recover and recoup and eat. Our digestive system is linked to our stress response. We don't digest food well when we're stressed. So lots of young people are not eating at school well because they are struggling. So they need that time at home to recover. And often as parents, they come through the door and we put a new load on them. So it's something about how do we help support that transition, understanding a bit more of the science behind what's going on. It takes a lot of the blame away if we're able to say the food mood roller coaster, when everybody's hungry, you're not going to be able to concentrate. You're way more likely to have an argument. That's no one's fault. That's just what happens in your body.
Yeah, I loved your tool, the well-being abacus. I'm going to use it in my classes, my classrooms with the students. Can you explain what the well-being abacus is and what are the
the 7 domains.
The few 7, yeah.
Yeah, so this is an idea really to help. It's a tool really for us to think not just about our children's mental health, but our own mental health too. So if you imagine a 7-rung abacus, each line is a domain that we know absolutely has a big impact on positive mental health and well-being. So the 7 areas are connection with others, so relationships. We know relationships are so important for all of us in keeping good mental health. Physical activity is so important. Good sleep. We all know that when you have a young baby and you get no sleep, you can barely function. Good nutrition. Keep learning, so the opportunity to learn new things.
To feel that you're growing.
To feel like you're growing and you're developing and your brain is being sparked and energized. Noticing now, I mean, that seems like a thing we talk about with mindfulness, but really it's more than that. It's just about being able to be in the moment. We're constantly in the past worrying about, did I get this right?
Future.
Or in the future, what's going to happen next? And this is very tiring for our brains. And we're analysing everything all of the time. And in a very, very busy world, we have to very intentionally notice the things that are going to give us some kind of peace and rest from that. So often I say to children about walking to school, just all it takes is when you're walking to school, look at the trees or look at the buildings, notice the brickwork. So it's something about just being more attentive to your here and now. And the other is be giving. So being kind to others makes you produce neurochemicals that make you feel good. Even seeing somebody else be kind to someone else gives you those neurochemicals of feeling good. There was some research that showed if you just asked people to do 3 kind things in a week, really simple things. It could be making someone a drink. It could be opening the door for someone, paying someone a compliment. It doesn't have to be difficult things. Then actually this was more effective than therapy for people, because when you do a kind thing, you get something back, you get that connection. And it was actually most effective for the people who struggle with relationships more in their life, because perhaps they don't naturally do kind things because they feel a bit inhibited about doing things for other people. So the idea of the abacus is, if you think about the 7 rungs and you've got numbers 1 to 9, you could, or 1 to 10, sorry, you can say 10 is the best I could be in any of those areas and 1 is the worst. And you can explore with your child, where do you think you are with relationships? So what's going on in your life? Who are you getting on well with? How's things going with your friends? How are things going with your teachers? How do you think things are going in your family? How would you score that from 1 to 10? And they might be, well, it's a 6. And then you can go through each of the rungs to get a sense of the areas of their life that so it's all about their perspective, not your perspective. And you've got to prevent yourself from going, well, actually, I think that's a 7. Because it's a real tendency. I've seen parents do it. No, I think you're very good at noticing that. But Dad, I actually don't. I think I'm a 3 on that.
Yeah.
So it's really about
how they feel about
your child's perspective on this. It's not, when we do numbers with things, we kind of think that has to be the absolute truth. No, it's just a way of putting a line in the sand for your child and making it visual and tangible. And then the beautiful thing about this is you can say, so let's say your child said they were a 6 on relationships out of 10. You can say, okay, what makes it a 6 and not a 5? And then your kid can say, well, you know what? I find this teacher at school really helpful. And so it's a 6, not a 5. And then you could say, what stops it being a 7? I could say, well, actually, my best friend has been off school all week ill and I haven't seen much of her. So, if she was around, it probably would be a 7. So you're helping your child have those conversations in a non-judgmental way, a curious way. It gives you permission to be more curious, to find out the things that are the struggles and the things that are the positives, the protective things. And from there, you can say there's a domino effect. So if you have a bad night's sleep, it affects the other ratings. Yeah. So when I have a bad night's sleep, I'm really irritable. My relationships go down from a 7 to a 5. My ability to concentrate at work and be motivated about projects definitely goes down. I might not bother going out for a walk or a run.
But now you're aware why. Yeah. So you have it a little bit better for yourself.
But how can we convince the children to spend more time in nature or to do some physical activities if they have 1 single hour They want to use the tablet, the TV. Is it very difficult for parents to convince them to choose the nature and sport?
You know, it's almost impossible because the power of the screen is so addictive for young people. And I mean, it's addictive for us. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I often spend time scrolling through Instagram instead of, I could have gone for a nice little walk for 10 minutes. And I think the beauty of the Abacus is it's about small changes that can potentially make a big difference. So if you have, for example, on the Abacus, your physical activity for your child is coming out as a 4 and they prefer it to be a 5 or a 6. I actually did this with a young person and I said, why is your physical activity, why is it not a 6? He said, it's because of my screens. He said, don't tell my dad, but it's because I've been on my screen. And so then we were able to have a conversation. Okay, we know physical activity is good. We know being outside is good. So what could you do a little bit every day? What would be easy? Because it's about making things easy and accessible and rewarding straight away. How could you just build in something small every day to give you a bit more outside time where you're moving around? And he was like, well, I've got a basketball hoop. I could just go out for 5 minutes. And actually what you will notice is, because I'd done this with my son, is he can now regulate himself. He knows I need to do 10 minutes outside with my basketball or my football. And he will go outside and do that because the book covers screen time and it talks about the impact of dopamine and the dopamine crash when we remove our children and ask them to come off their devices and they're very low for a while. And I've explained to my children, you will feel like that for a while. That's because your body is like not needing to make that feel-good chemical and it now needs to wait to feel low to kick in to make its own feel-good chemical again. So you're going to feel terrible, but you mustn't fill that void with going back on a screen or doing something like eating food to fill the gap. Do something like just get outside or dance around or, do something like that. And then that will help you through that phase. And so you can actually, by learning this stuff yourself and having the tools to have the conversations in a collaborative way where you're talking kind of respectfully to your children, rather than nagging them, because otherwise it just feels like you're telling them the stuff, they all know that being outside is better for you than probably being on the game. It's just a
push and pull, like it's the game.
It's like it becomes a fight, a battle. This is a kind of way of like educating our children and giving them some choices. So what will help you be outside more? There are certain things that will not help me be outside more. There are certain activities I hate doing. Like if you said to me, go and play a team sport outside, I'd probably be, I'm not sure I could do that. But for my son, playing football with a team is just exactly what he wants to do. So it's finding what your child enjoys and honouring that and using that as the tool to help them engage more with those activities. But sometimes as a parent, I talk about this in the book, you have to force your kids out of their bedrooms as much as they hate you, as much as they're screaming and shouting, as moody as they are, to take them into doing activities as a family. And sometimes they will be moody for an hour or two and you're like, this is worth it. I'm trying to make so much effort here to be a good parent, take them to, the park or whatever it is. The seaside is often because I live near the coast. I'm thinking, God, this is so much work. They would rather be in their rooms, in their own world. But then they do break out of it and they do embrace the day and get back into the zone of the moment. But it's a painful process. I think it's hard. And I think there's something about learning to accept it is tough sometimes to be doing the right things as a parent. It doesn't come naturally. And that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It often means you're doing it right. And I think we probably have this idea when we come into parenthood that we will all feel quite natural. It will all just happen. And, it doesn't.
So if my kid is unhappy, then I must be not a good parent, right? So it's very important to stress this thing for those who are listening. It's about my ability to hold on in the moment, even if the feelings of my kids don't look well and they feel really bad for me. So, because most of the parents, they just want to, we've spoken about this, move away from this bad feeling and then put the kid back in the house because I can't handle this horrible emotions. So I loved what you said about your oldest kid. being able to cope with all these difficult feelings when he's on his own at the uni, or I know through the college years, all the bad stuff that you had going on among each other, by the way, because you felt guilty about that day, all these bad things that happened between you and him are actually a good training period for the times he's on his own, right?
Completely, yeah, that's a really good point. So my 19-year-old has gone to university, and when he came home and he was telling me about all the drama.
They all have.
And the flatmates and someone in their flat is, there've been some struggles with, and all the challenges. And as I was listening to him, and he was so kind of calm about it and had such a good perspective on it, and I just thought, wow, you know, all those situations in our family that have been quite demanding, that have been quite challenging, that we've made our way through together. It's been messy, but it's actually, we have made our way through together.
They serve the purpose.
Actually, that's what's more important to my son now. That's what's given him the skills to be able to be wise and manage these situations and not come totally dysregulated and distressed by them. So I was thinking, actually, all the things that I was so distressed about at those moments, this has ruined the family day, this has ruined my moment. They were actually the training and preparation for life. And the reality is that life is tough. It brings huge disappointment, and helping our children prepare for that by life not being perfect is probably much more powerful, and not feeling like, as a parent, everything's ruined because these things are happening in my life which I didn't want to happen, which shouldn't have happened. I mean, so many things happen, don't they? That this shouldn't be happening. This wasn't part of the plan. This is so unfair. But if we have a perspective of, this is an opportunity to learn something new about ourselves, to find out how brave we are, to find out how courageous we are. And I do a lot of that reframing. For example, anxiety is such a big challenge. And I think young people who are struggling with anxiety feel like they're failed. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced anxiety.
We do have it.
But you feel like somehow you're not there's something wrong with you, you're not as good as other people. It gives you a real sense of inferiority. And how I often talk about it with families and young people is, you know, when you're feeling anxious, the body sensation you're feeling is telling you you're just about to do something courageous. You are just about to be exceptionally brave. It's irrelevant whether, you know, someone else can do this thing without even thinking about it. For you, this is you being brave. And so it's not, the feeling you've got isn't predicting that this is going to be a disaster, because that's the problem, isn't it, with anxiety? The feeling that tells us in our mind something bad is about to happen. And so helping your child take some, I mean, joy is probably too strong a word, but helping them to move away from, this feeling tells me something bad is about to happen, I need to get away from it, to, this feeling tells me I'm about to do something brave. I can do this. It's okay. Despite this feeling, I'm going to be courageous right now. And often as parents, we can struggle to support that sometimes because we are so worried about our children having bad experiences. And so there's something about how we talk as well to enable our children to feel the feeling and do the thing that they're afraid of.
I've read somewhere that whenever you worry about your kid, you actually take something from them, take some energy from them. Like, because they feel your worry and they feel this, they translate this worry into these words. Is there something wrong about myself that my mom always predicts the worst of it, right?
Yeah.
And we worry a lot.
Yeah, we worry a lot.
One day.
Since I read that, I stopped worrying and I moved towards the better thought or the better feeling thought, because I know I take something from her when I worry. And I know she feels it. Even if she's at a very long distance.
Yeah, your confidence in your child's ability to manage difficulty will be transmitted and transferred, won't it? So if you know you're doing something big, you've got a big event that you're anxious about, if other people around you are really worried about your performance, it makes you doubt whether you can do it.
Yeah.
But if people have confidence and believe in you, then you feel, I can do this.
You just start flowing and you can do this. Yeah.
And also if you believe, you know what, if I kind of mess it up a bit, it just shows I'm a human being. People like it. People don't like to be perfect.
In a better way. Yeah.
I learned that with my parent workshops. If I pretended I was having a great life as a parent and I was perfect, people hated it. It just made them feel worse about themselves. When I started saying, gosh, this is so difficult, this happened to me today, they were like, oh gosh, tell us more. Yeah. It's so reassuring that you know all this stuff and yet you find it so hard. It makes me as a parent feel so much better. And I think that's, so important to be able to own some of the bits that we don't get quite right, because then we give permission to other people to do the same.
What about the girls what's up with them? When they turn 10 or 11, they fear they are ugly, they fear they are rejected, they fear what's happening with the girls today. I see them transforming in my school. They're nice, they're young, they're happy. And suddenly when they turn 9, 10, 11, even like earlier stages, they just start being, sad about themselves. They don't like their face, they don't like their eyes. They look sideways, they withdraw. I had some girls in my school with depression starting at age 12. Why?
Well, there's many reasons. I think it's complex, but some of those reasons are going to be linked to the biology of being female.
Yeah.
And I think puberty is starting earlier.
It is.
For young people, for girls. And we know that when you go through puberty for girls, you produce more estrogen. And estrogen makes your stress response more sensitive to stress. And as a consequence, we often see we know that adolescent girls are much more likely to develop anxiety and low mood than boys. Now, testosterone, when you produce testosterone, when boys start to produce more testosterone, it actually is protective. It buffers the stress system from cortisol. So I think there are some biological changes that happen which create additional challenges for women. And I think for many mothers that's really challenging because our children may be going through puberty when we're going through the perimenopause.
Yeah.
So the estrogen fluctuations that we're experiencing coincide with the estrogen.
There's a clash in the house. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something perhaps we don't talk about enough because it's incredible how much your hormones can influence your moods and how you feel about yourself. We know that adolescence is a time where you become very preoccupied with your identity. You become very preoccupied with how you look and how you fit in. I think that's an age-old challenge that is a natural developmental part of going into adolescence. But I think young people are going into adolescence earlier.
Yeah.
And again, I think the world around them is more focused than ever on the value of appearance. And so it's very difficult to not have those thoughts and then get something confirm from the world around you, whether that's, again, I go back to technology because young people are on their phones and seeing so many curated images. So that accentuates that feeling and that sense of difference. So it's additional pressures. And I think, we are often focused on qualities of how things look, perhaps more than qualities of how we are, And I think that's a really important thing that we can do as parents is we can notice the qualities that we see in our children of kindness, gratitude, teach them gratitude, but working hard, diligence, and say out loud, I'm so proud to see how hard you're working on that piece of work, so that we are giving positive reinforcement to some of those things which are not perhaps openly kind of applauded in their world. And for young people who are very self-critical and have high standards, they are also going to probably be quite diligent and be working quite hard and feel the pressure of school and performance and academic performance. And again, it's helping that young person move away from thinking it's all about results and how well I do, and more about
how I
journey
am as a person,
and how I am as a person. And I think the other thing I often say I meet with lots of anxious young people is I help reframe that a little. Most of the people who I work in my team now were all probably quite anxious as adolescents, but they are such diligent, conscientious, hard-working individuals, and
they're very tuned into everything around.
Tuned into their world, to other people. They're very caring and kind, and not to say that people who aren't anxious are not, but I think it's important to remember that anxiety is often about caring a lot about certain things,
being very intense about all kind of sensorial information.
And so it's something about how do you not lose the positives that this brings, and how do you learn to create some balance in your life and be kind to yourself, and develop self-compassion, which is, something we can do as moms when we just talking. I have to do this all the time because I'm very self-critical, and I often have to intentionally be compassionate towards myself. So I talk out loud all the time. I'm like, I'm so cross that I've messed up on this, but I did do this and this today. So actually I've got to hold in mind that, I'm only human after all. And sometimes I also have to admit that because I'm so intensely preoccupied by something else, it's impossible for me to be good at that as well. And that's okay, because that thing's really important to me, and that thing I can let slide. So it's something about how do we role model those values. So we give our children permission to be both brilliant and terrible,
When do we know that our child needs support? What would be the signs?
So,
like professional support,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. And I think this is one of the big questions parents have for me. How do I know this is, especially with teenagers, how do I know if this is normal, spending all their time in their room and never talking to anyone and looking really down? And how do I know when it's something I need to worry about and get additional help for? I think with all of these difficulties, it's going to be how long something has been going on for. So if you're worried about your child, how long has this been a problem? Is this just the last week, or has this been going on for a number of weeks? It's also how intensely those things are affecting that child's ability to do the things in their life they need to get done. Is this affecting whether they can get dressed in the morning or showered in the morning? Are they losing any kind of motivation to do the things that they used to love doing? So noticing your child not enjoying things or not participating in things. Not eating
well like before.
Yeah. And sleep and food. Again, going back to the abacus is a really helpful thing, because if you notice that your child is sleeping too much or too little, and your children or your team might not tell you, so that's something you can potentially explore with them, because sometimes they can be for hours in their bed worrying about things. So yes, and it's often you're seeing across different parts of their life that they're struggling. So they might be struggling at school and at home and with their friends. So it's kind of trying to see the whole picture. So one thing on its own, it might be fine, but then when you put all of those little things together, you start to see, actually, this is a child who's really struggling to manage the stresses of life right now. And how are they communicating to that through their behaviour? Are they stopping doing the things that are important to them? Are they disengaging with relationships with you as a parent or their friends? Sometimes children, particularly younger children, become very close and clingy and needy, and they are become unable to do the things that you would be expecting them to do. And I think the book helps you as a parent unpick the puzzle, because sometimes it can feel a bit of an enigma, so that you can make sense of it. Because I think it's a bit like switching on a light. Once you're able to make sense of things, when you're kind of in the dark, it's scary. It's like it doesn't make sense. You don't know what to do. You're in the dark. But once you start to build this picture and turn the light on, you have that clarity, and it then enables you to tackle the challenges which are lying behind the behaviours rather than just the behaviours. Because a lot of young people, some of their behaviours actually get back from their parents' punishment. and further sanctions, because when our children are struggling, they often misbehave actually, and they're uncooperative and they're not doing the things that you need them to do. And our response to that naturally can be, you need to get this done. And, what's wrong with you? I mean, that's something I try to avoid saying, what's wrong with you? And so I think it's kind of building that understanding and that curiosity for yourself as a parent takes a lot of the fear out of seeing your children, some of their behaviours, and panicking. What's wrong with you? And thinking, what's going on for my child in their life right now? And those conversation tools, because it's really hard to have, you go into the room and say, what's wrong with you? What's wrong?
No, that's not the best moment.
No,
you have to wait for
a
good moment.
Shut down. And teenagers, I hate it when my mum comes and says, what's wrong with you? But what they actually tell me is conversation in the car or going on a walk. And we know that actually direct eye contact in intense conversations is actually unhelpful for people to be able to disclose.
They don't like it.
So being able to do an activity where you don't have to have eye contact, and it's kind of a bit counterintuitive because we privilege eye contact to show connection and that we're listening, don't we? But
especially women, but boys don't like that.
Yeah. So doing a shared activity, creating routines in the day where your children, like there's certain routines where my kids will always come down for a snack and be opening the fridge and getting stuff. And I always think I'll hang around at that point in the day because that's the point in the day when they're likely to be able to have a positive, more collaborative conversation with me. So kind of learn the rhythms of your family, work out when's a good time for your child to...
Yeah, and once you get a good moment to start a conversation, you have to just... stop being wise to them. I noticed my daughter, when she's opening up to me, she's also watching if I'm going to say something wise and I'm going to get a teachable moment. Yeah. She hates that. She doesn't want me to teach her anything. She just wants me to listen. And then when I start saying something, I must be very, very careful not to show that I'm wiser and I know stuff better. Now she's old enough to tell me, I'm going to tell you, but do not start saying that you know how to do this stuff. I don't want to hear. Yeah, sometimes they just want you to be a good listener without saying anything, without, I don't know, teach them something. Maybe you catch them 3 days later, but not in the moment when they open up to you.
I think that's the biggest challenge for us as parents. We move to finding solutions
too fast,
or dishing out the kind of consequence. So you're behaving like this right now, that means you're going to lose this thing, or I need to talk to you about your behavior.
That's not an interview. That's just people talking to each other. Right? Yeah.
So I think it's about, I talk in the book about right time, right place, right pace for those sorts of conversations. But if you think about yourself and what you need when you're really distressed, you just need somebody to just really be with you in that moment and not be trying to do anything
just
to you.
Just a mirror to echo you, not being wise to you. Right?
And we kind of forget that. So the stuff that our children hate that we do in those moments is the stuff we hate if another person does it to us, But I feel like we carry so much responsibility.
Yeah. And I feel entitled, like, no, now it's another teachable moment. I must give her that. But no, they don't want it.
It's just often about creating the space. And another little kind of trick I find with adolescents is when you talk to adolescents with the most respected voice you can ever come up with. So often we talk down to our adolescents, and because of the way their brains are wired, they hate this. They literally repel against adults sharing information. Yeah. Their peers are the people that they are more inclined to listen to and take notice from. So if you, and this is true for teaching staff as well in schools, if you talk to a teenager very respectfully as if they are an equal, or even maybe your most revered person, if you were having an interview with someone you completely admired, if you talk to them in that way, they will immediately you'll get a completely different response from them, and it's incredible. It is like magic. And there is something about that transition from childhood to adolescence where we learn to think about those micro movements in, like you said,
Of
our
your face,
face, and also our tone of voice and how we are kind of relating to them. And also, you know, it requires quite a lot of learning to be a bit more open-minded, because our teenagers are exploring the world
ahead of us with a lot.
And they're covering topics, and they're much more open-minded than us, and they're much more likely to have those conversations with us if we're able to hold back on our opinions and our views. And I don't think that's a very good thing if we're able. And it's really tough, because some of the stuff they're talking about,
It's really, I've been there many times, so
really
I have
hard.
the
We
right
have
answer
to
right away.
teach ourselves to be good actors, you know.
Yeah.
Mimics,
good
and also
listeners.
voice. Also small children detect the tone of the voice, because sometimes my 5-year-old boy tell me, oh, don't use this voice. I don't like this voice. So I have to use the voice he likes so that I can transmit the message.
And I think it starts off feeling like acting, but once you get the results, it feels a lot of effort. When you change your behaviours, it feels really effortful. It's sometimes such hard work, it's difficult for us to do. But once we get the good once we see it works, and we do more of it, it becomes less effortful, and then it just becomes natural. So what feels a bit forced at the beginning starts to become actually your way of being, because it's so effective. And I think the thing about the adolescent thing is I had to work really hard about being more open-minded. But then, you know what I discovered? I actually started changing some of my views and opinions on things, because some of my children's perspectives or adolescents' perspectives were actually really quite impressive and different. And so I went from a place of acting like this was a good conversation, even though I'm thinking, to actually really looking forward
and
to
being
having
curious
these
about-
conversations and thinking, well, I've got something to learn here. So I've learned so much, and there's something as well about having a bit more fun as being a parent.
I've learned from my daughter, even the other day, that I can do a lot of stuff without worrying or stressing about it. Like, we were on the car, and I was driving, and she was supposed to go change her passport, get another SIM card for her phone. She had a lot to do that day. And I started, once we got in the car, I started, okay, you have to do this, you have to do this. And you know what she did? She turned the music up. I was like, I'm gonna kill this woman. She's old now. But then I held on to myself and said, no, she's getting a nice, polite message, that I should not tell her what to do today, and I should not tell her from this kind of place of stress and, and she did it all just listening to music in her ear. I cannot do this stuff in such a relaxed mode.
They're different.
Because
from
they're so
us,
different.
yes.
And I thought if she's this relaxed, then she won't be able to accomplish all these difficult tasks. But that's how I grew, that if I struggle, if I'm stressed, if I'm not relaxed, I can accomplish stuff. Now, they see life in a very different perspective. Maybe that's why they have this anxiety inside, one of the reasons, because they see this clash between how their parents do things and how they can do these things. And they're still teaching us and elevate us. I'm trying to be this cool when I do stuff and be like her.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful thing, because you're kind of getting something back. I think it's hard work being a parent, isn't it? And once your children get to that kind of early adulthood, you start to sort of think, actually, maybe I could have relaxed a bit more and had a bit more fun.
But it was so hard to hold on to these 2 minutes when I thought, she's being not very nice to me. She's not listening to me. She's gonna lose her things today. She's gonna miss everything. No, they can do it. She called me like in 30 minutes. I've done it all. Oh my God, she can do this without worrying. Yeah.
So you can find more information in Dr. Beth Mosley's book, Familii Fericite. O găsiți deja în România. Thank you so much, Dr. Mosley. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oana?
Și eu am câteva cărți pentru copii mai mici, tot de la Olina Ortiz. O carte cu 15 expresii românești foarte amuzante, de tipul umblă câinii cu covrigi în coadă sau să rupem pisica odată, care sunt reîmprospătate de autoare în stil modern, jucăuș și hazliu, adică povești care reiau aceste expresii în stilul propriu-zis literal, care hrănește starea de râs a copilului, dar și înțelegerea sensului figurat al cuvintelor. Și 3 cărți despre Mozart, Urmuz și Picasso, care nu sunt deloc de genul stai să vă povestesc eu despre mari oameni ai artei, ci pornesc de la povești super simple, amuzante, în care copiii învață să descopere arta tot în mod foarte hazliu.
Pentru copii mai mici, pentru că am vorbit foarte mult despre adolescenți în episodul de astăzi.
Și mai mici, până la 11-12 ani, cărțile au fost testate de mine în taberele cu copii și au stănit foarte mult haz.
Mulțumim foarte mult. Thank you again. Mulțumim și vouă și ne auzim și ne vedem săptămâna viitoare la Părinți CuMinți.
Zunivers Podcasts.